This presentation is on Marbury v. Madison and action reviews that subsequently followed. Welcome to my presentation on the judicial review and the pertinent effects and facts regarding the landmark case of Marbury versus Madison in 1803. You have my introduction on page 3. You have the role of SCOTUS on 4. What is the judicial review on 5? And then cases of Marbury versus Madison in action. I ask the question, what's next? And offer you references as well as closing contact information on slides 7 through 15. The introduction, the concept and importance of Marbury v. Madison and Federal Judiciary Acts of 1789. The Constitution is our guide and the frame of reference of our society. Yet, our society is ever evolving and changing for the good and or for the bad. Therefore, judicial review is necessary to keep us civil. However, this is questionable, for judges are people too. The question on the Marbury v. Madison decision was pertaining to the Supreme Court Justice jurisdiction. The role of SCOTUS, the context and importance of. SCOTUS is found in the Constitution, Article 3, Sections 1, 2, and 3. The Constitution tells us that there is a judicial branch whose responsibility is to explicitly judge according to the jurisdiction and scope it has been given. Judgment cases are specific, for example, between states, between citizens of one state versus the citizens of another state, etc. Other cases must request an appellate hearing. These and all other cases are heard or are subject to judicial review, which is to mean it is to be determined on the constitutionality or the unconstitutionality of the law. Rosen, Jeffrey, 2020. Judicial review. The concept and importance of. SCOTUS again is on Article 3, Sections 1, 2, and 3. Again, the Constitution tells us that there is a judicial branch whose responsibility is explicitly to judge accordingly. All cases heard and legislative acts of Congress are subject to judicial review, which means to be determined on the constitutionality or the unconstitutionality of the case or the law. However, there is a subject of much consternation. This is a subject of much consternation. For albeit the Supreme Court's decisions are about sometimes on partisanship or political and personal convictions, and sometimes even about religious values. President Adams, John Quincy, proved this in his rash appointing of Federalist judge appointees. Ibid. It is not a perfect situation, and thankfully, during the Civil Rights era, it proved to be just. Okay, the results from judicial review during the years of 1952 to 1954. So we'll begin with judicial review of Brown v. the Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas in 1954. The concept and importance of judicial review and unanimous ruling. The constitutionality Supreme Court landmark case was the product of 4 cases brought together in a class action lawsuit, being that the falling of them was between states, and each one was versus their citizens in 1952. The cases challenged an original verdict by a past Supreme Court ruling. For instance, first, Plessy v. Ferguson in 1896. The Homer Adolph Plessy, who agreed to be the plaintiff, opposed the 14th Amendment of freeing slaves. The defendant in this case was a white judge, the Honorable John H. Ferguson of Louisiana. As many states still wanted to disqualify the lives of former slaves and their posterity. It was a form of perpetual denial and perpetual invisibility and timeless inequality. This established separate but equal. History.com editors. Racism flourished, and the segregation and Jim Crow laws likewise. They were scavenger hunts and traits that flew wildly, and we see rudimentary behaviors of Jim Crowism even today. The case was brought to the Supreme Court of Brown v. the Board of Ed by Thurgood Marshall, a then attorney with the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the NAACP, who would later, under President Johnson, be appointed to the U.S. Supreme Court. The Supreme Court of the United States decisions was that it was unconstitutional. Based on the 14th Amendment clause, no state can violate the Equal Protection Clause, which positions that no state can deny, end quote, deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. History.com, page 1, 2009, 2023. The impact of this decision, although the decision on how to desegregate which still had to be fine-tuned and worked out. However, it did set a precedence of equality. Thankfully, it was just during the introduction and into the civil rights era and subsequent times ahead, deeply rooted in American hearts and souls, racism was being slowly rooted out. So, what's next? What is next? The Constitution was a collaborative effort by men of conscience. It requires the same efforts and mindfulness for it to live up to its promise. Eaves-Walker, Cecilia. Well, it does require a team effort. As you see, there's Anna, Larissa, Roman, Federico, Alejandra, and then you and me. Will you join this effort? So we got a monthly timeline here by quarters, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So in quarter 1, what do we want to launch as our product? Well, let's care more for others, like our neighbors. And then in the second quarter, what do we want to launch as our product? Let's smile more. In quarter 3, what would we like to launch for our product? Pay attention to our health. hmm And then in quarter 4, for our product launch, what do we want to launch? We want to care for our planet. So here we go for the goals for quarter 1, the product launch, which we said we want to care more for others like our neighbors. And I have neighborly opportunities, for instance, end thinking in terms of race by July 15th. Embrace a day of learning on August 14th. Exercise acts of kindness on September 3rd. Seek alternatives to solutions, and that begins in September 10th. What's the business practices going on? Increase customer or student satisfaction by 2%. Maintain or increase learning growths. Can we do that? And then an initiative partnership with third-party organizations would be another way to care more for others. The goal for quarter 2 and the promise to smile more. Under business priorities, again, we want to increase customer or the student satisfaction by 2%, and we want to maintain growth. Under added priorities, we want to improve our social consciousness and ensure the cost of daily duties that they stay manageable. Employee student opportunities, Well, after school helps begin here. Let's join an indoor recreational league or create one. I'm into drama, so let's do drama classes. In other words, focus on watching the big picture. References. In closing, should you like to collaborate, find my contact information below. Thanks to your commitment and strong, caring ethic, we know that together we can create a better world. Do remember to take time to pamper yourself. It's important to remember to be kind to yourself too. I am Cecilia Eaves-Walker. Can be found on YouTube channel Cecilia Eaves-Walker, MED.